What's going on, producers and songwriters? This video is part 2 of a 2-part series on how to make chords and progressions for producers and songwriters. Here, we're going to be talking about slightly more advanced topics, not incredibly more advanced. However, if you have not seen part 1, definitely click the video anywhere on this screen so you can watch part 1, because there's where we laid the groundwork for how we create chords, how chords create progressions, and essentially the foundation for everything we're going to be talking about here in this video. So if you have not seen part 1, hit pause on this video right now, or just click the video on the screen so you can watch part 1 and then come back into here, because I'm not going to be recapping anything I went over in part 1. I already went over it in that video. So today specifically, we are going to be talking about number 1, the ultimate tension chord. Tension chords are so important. Just like when you watch a movie, you know, movies all follow the same kind of 2-part principle. There's conflict and then there's resolution. If you're watching a superhero movie, the hero keeps losing and losing and losing, and then finally he overcomes the villain and he wins at the end. The movie wouldn't be interesting if he was just winning the whole time, right? If there was just, you know, resolution the whole time. There's conflict and there's resolution, and that's what makes it interesting. So it's the same thing with music, except what we call it is tension and release. And that's primarily done by the harmony. We have chords that give us this stank face, right? It's this tension, and then it pulls us perfectly into this resolution. Or it resolves somewhere that we don't expect. So what we're going to be going over today is the core of how to create that tension, where that tension comes from. That way you can have mastery over using that tension and release it accordingly. Then we're going to jump into the minor scale, because as we talked about in video number 1, chords come from scales. So we're going to be talking about the minor version of the songwriter's alphabet today. So we have to talk about the minor scale first. And then we're going to take a look at a few song examples so we can see how this stuff works in context. We can see how some of our heroes, or just how some very popular artists, have used these techniques in very popular music, so that we can take some of that and we can use it in our own music. Before we get into the meat of the content, do me a big favor and hit that subscribe button below. It helps out the channel way more than you know, and that way you can also be notified when videos like these drop on a regular basis. Our tension chord. Our tension chord is called the dominant chord, okay? And if we're remembering from last week, the dominant chord naturally occurs as the 5 chord in our Roman numeral formula, in the songwriter's alphabet. So just a quick refresher, we have 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, and 5 dominant. And in part 1, I alluded to this one being special, and we're gonna talk about why it's special right now. The dominant chord is written just as a 7, so G7, okay? If we were to play A dominant, it'd be A7. If we were to play D dominant, it'd be D7, okay, just so you know how it's written. So when we have a dominant 7 chord, it's just the letter and the number 7. Now the reason this chord is special is because it doesn't work so well by itself. When we play a regular major chord, it sounds so beautiful just by itself. Even if I play a minor chord, they work well by themselves. If I play a dominant chord with a little bit of extra tension, doesn't sound, it sounds incomplete, right? If I were in a hotel lobby right now and I were to sit down on the piano and say, you'd be like, yo, get this guy off the piano. Like, that did not sound good, right? However, it doesn't mean it's wrong. The dominant chord is our tension chord, and it needs to be attached to a major or minor chord, because this is our tension to our resolution, okay? That's the magic of the dominant chord. It gives you that resolution. Or I can resolve to minor, right? Or maybe I can even bring it somewhere you're not completely expecting, right? Or right? There's so many different ways that we can resolve it, but the point is we're creating this tension, and this tension can't be alone. I mean, it can be, but most of the time we take this tension and we want to resolve it, because that's what makes it cool. And again, later we're gonna take a look at some contextual examples so we can see how other people have used this tension chord, but This is the common area of confusion for producers and songwriters. They avoid dominant chords because they play them. They're like, that sounds wrong. It's not wrong. It just needs to resolve to the right place. And the typical resolution is going to be your 5 to the 1. So the G7 chord coming into C, right? Because what we do is we hear that, like that is such a beautiful sound, and that's what we want to hear. Now we can also resolve this 5 going to the 6th chord. That's a very, very common one. It's another very common thing. But you see how when I just play this, you're expecting it. You're expecting something, and then I finally give it to you. And that's the function of the dominant chord. It naturally pulls you into the release, okay? Even when you add all the, all the extensions and all the colors to it, it naturally pulls you into that release. That's the purpose of the dominant chord, to provide that tension, and then we release. And we can release to the 1 chord most commonly, or we can release to the 6th chord most commonly. And if you don't understand what I mean by the 1 chord or the 6th chord, you probably haven't watched part 1, so go check out part 1 and then resume this video. We're gonna come back to that dominant chord so we can see it in action, but I wanna take a slight pivot and talk about the minor scale, so that we can begin to build the minor version of the Roman numeral formula, the songwriter's alphabet. So minor scales actually come from major scales, and all we need to do is tweak a little something in the major scale, and we end up with a minor scale. So what do I mean by that? Well, essentially, you're gonna take the major scale and you're gonna flat the 3rd note, you're gonna flat the 6th note, and you're gonna flat the 7th note. Now what do I mean by flat? Flat is very simple. Basically, if I just take a white key right here, flat means you just go down by 1/2 step. You just go down by 1/2 step. That's it. So if I'm on A and I want to play A flat, just go down by 1/2 step and boom. So if we have our C major scale, like we talked about last week, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flat the 3rd note, which is E. I'm gonna flat the 6th note, which is A, and I'm gonna flat the 7th note, which is B. And so I end up with this: C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. And that gives me a minor scale. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. That's what people mean when you hear them say, flat 3 or flat 6. This is what they're referring to. Compared to the major scale, this note is now flat. That's really what it means. So here's our C minor scale. And so here are our notes. As I was mentioning last week, we want to be able to zoom into just these notes, and these notes are highlighted. These notes are popping out, and everything else disappears, right? So this E natural doesn't exist, this A, this B, this C sharp, none of that stuff is in my awareness. All I'm focused on are these notes in C minor, because this is what's gonna allow me to play in this scale, to think in this scale. Like, these notes are the sound of C minor. If you play something else, it's gonna sound wrong. So we wanna be able to, just like it looks highlighted right here, that's how we wanna view it in our mind when we're playing this scale. And it's gonna make it very, very easy for us to do our jobs. Now, let's go ahead and build our Roman numeral formula, our songwriter's alphabet, in minor. So I already know that here's my minor scale, right? C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat. So the same way that I did it in major, where we start from the 1st note and we play 1, skip 1, play 1, skip 1, play 1, to get our 1st chord, and then we start from the 2nd note, 3rd note. We're gonna do that same thing. The only difference is we're gonna use the C minor scale. So it's not going to look as obvious, because obviously if I'm doing this, you can see that I'm skipping, 1 key in between all the notes. But when I do that in minor, it becomes a little less obvious. Visually, it becomes less visually obvious. But remember, when we're thinking like this, we really want to be able to ignore all the other notes and just think in C minor. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's stack them up like a pancake. Let's play 1, skip 1 using the C minor scale and see what chords we come up with. So from the 1st note, we have a minor chord. Obviously, if we're playing C minor, the first chord is going to be minor. And again, it's a lowercase number 1 because it's a minor chord, right? Uppercase means major chords, lowercase means minor chords. Awesome. Let's do it from the second note. Play 1, skip 1, play 1, skip 1, play 1. Now we have a diminished chord. So let's do it from the flat 3. Play 1, skip 1, play 1, skip 1, play 1. We have a major chord. So we have flat 3, major. Let's go from the F. Play 1, skip 1, play 1, skip 1, play 1. Our 4 is minor. Let's go from the 5. Play 1, skip 1, play 1, skip 1, play 1. Let's go from the A flat. Our flat 6 is major. And let's go from the B flat. Our flat 7 is major. You don't have to play it in the way that I did, where I said, you don't have to do that. I'm just showing you visually how I'm playing one, skipping one. So we can see that these chords naturally form in this way when we stack them up like a pancake following the scale. This is just how it happens naturally. So this is what I end up with. C minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major, and then I'm back to 1. So just like I did with the major scale, I can already start taking some of these chords and messing around with them. So I can do 4, 5, flat 6, right? We go up to the 7, right? 4, 5, flat 6. Now 4, 5, flat 6. Up to flat 7. And I'm just playing triads here. So I can do the same. I can maybe even say 4, 5, 1, flat 3. Let's try that. Another example, let's try flat 6, flat 7, 1. Just going up in order, right? So flat 6, flat 7. Flat 3. So there's so many different options that we can do here. And again, we're going to be taking a look at some contextual examples so we can see how other people have put together chord progressions using this formula verbatim. But taking this one step further, I'm just playing triads here, right? And like I mentioned in part 1, when we're talking about R&B and neo soul and gospel and these more soulful genres, even if they're fused with pop, really the baseline for making the chord progressions is the 7th chords. We don't play too many triads. We play 7th chords. And if we're not playing 7th chords, we're playing 9th chords, or we're adding the 11, or maybe even adding the 13. That's what makes those genres those genres. Those notes are the juicy notes. So it would really, really be a wise thing to be completely comfortable, not just with the triads, but to be completely comfortable with the 7th chords, because that's what's going to put you ahead of 90% of the producers out there. So let's go ahead and see what we end up with when we add the 7th to these. Our first chord, we get a minor 7 chord. Our 2 chord, this is a half diminished. Our flat 3, we have a major 7. 4, minor 7, all in C minor. We have a minor 7 chord. Flat 6 is major 7. And B flat is our dominant 7. There's our dominant guy. Again, doesn't sound really great by itself, but when I bring it home, it sounds really great. Or I can even bring it to the flat 3 because this is the major sound. And it sounds wonderful. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second, but just to show you, there's our dominant chord in minor. So one of the ways to really get comfortable with this is just to play it up as I was playing it right now. You can do the individual notes, and you don't have to do it this fast. I'm just doing it for the sake of the video. Or you can just chord it out in block chords. The reason this is important is now because when I want to go ahead and play the chords, I already have it under my fingers, I can already see it, I can already feel it. That way when I'm creating, I don't have to get bogged down in, ooh, what are the notes? They're already there. I already have them under my fingers. I already have them in my brain. That way I could just use them. That way I don't have to figure it out as I'm trying to write music and be creative and be in that flow. It's already under my fingers. It's already in my brain. I can just pull it out Easy. So let's do that same chord progression we did before, just with the 7. So we had 4, 5, and flat 6, right? So sounds cool, right? And maybe we could bring this to the 1, so sounds pretty cool. I like that. Now let's do the other one that we did. So flat 6, flat 7, 1. So again, just playing regular triads, not adding any of the 7s or the 9s or the 11s or the 13s. We absolutely can, and we probably will, taking a look at some of the contextual examples so we can see the difference in emotion that we get from just triads and then adding some of the extra stuff. But let's take a look at one of the other progressions I played. Flat 6, flat 7, 1. So A flat major 7, B flat 7, C minor 7. And let's do it with the 7s. Just straight root position. To the flat 3. So this is one I would probably change the voicings a little bit because it sounds a little funky like that. I actually don't like how that B flat 7 sounds. I wouldn't play it as a dominant chord there. It can work, absolutely, but for my personal taste, just what I'm feeling in the moment and the feeling and the emotion I'm getting out of that progression, I think I would actually want to make that a major 9 chord or just a triad. So let's see how that would sound. That feels much better to me. Okay, sorry guys, I'm starting to add some of the colors here. It just feels better. It just feels better like that. So you know, just because you're using 7th chords doesn't mean every chord needs to be a 7th. Just because you're using triads doesn't mean every chord needs to be a triad. You can start to mix and match these things, and you learn how to mix and match them by learning songs and by seeing how other people are using it, which is why we're going to take a look at the contextual examples here in just a minute. But before we do, there's one more thing I want to talk about in the minor songwriter's alphabet, and that is the 5 chord. So we see that this 5 chord is a minor chord, right? What we can do is we can simply actually just make this a dominant chord, just like it happens in the major side of things, because this is going to give us more tension going back to the 1 chord. So for example, if I play the 4, 5, 1, okay, and I play 4 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. There's so many songs that do this, and as a matter of fact, the first song that we're going to take a look at uses these chords. But notice how it sounds very smooth, right? Minor 4, minor 5, minor 1. But if I make the 5 a dominant, listen to what happens to the character of the chord progression. It immediately has some more tension. And again, just because I make the 5 a dominant doesn't mean I need to use it as a dominant every single time. I can play it the first time, F minor 7, G minor 7, C minor 7, and then the second time in the progression, F minor 7, G7, C minor 7. That way we get different feelings and different emotions, and it's not just the same thing all the time. So right? It sounds really nice to toggle between the two. And especially if we start adding some of the colors and the extensions and those juicy notes that really make the chords pop, and especially make the tension chords pop, we start getting some really, really nice things. So be aware that in minor, you can simply just play the 5 chord as a dominant chord, and it's going to give you some really nice things. So let's actually take a look one more time before we go into the contextual examples of some of those progressions that I was playing a second ago, and see if we can add the G7 in and see what it does to it. So we did 4, 5, flat 6, right? So the first progression we did was... So let's change the rhythm just a little bit so we can really hear that 5 chord, since that's what we're going for. So let's say... Sounds really cool. Let's start putting some colors on it just to see what happens. That sounds really nice. There's a lot of different things we can do here. You can even say... right? Or we just leave it regular. And then maybe next time we get fancy with it. So you see, just by changing that 5 chord, we get a completely different emotional feel. Now I'm sure as this was lighting up and you saw it say flat 9 and then you saw it say sharp 9 and sharp 5 and all this stuff, if you're thinking about that in a traditional way, as traditional music theory teaches you how to think about it, it can get really confusing and really overwhelming really fast. But there's actually a much simpler way to go about it, where you can literally just play 4-note shapes over a single bass note and you get the same chord quality. 4-note shapes over a single bass note and you get the same chord quality. 4-note shape over a single bass note and then you get the exact chord quality you're looking for. This is called the grip system, and it really allows you to get these really juicy, nice tension chords very simply. If these are sounds you want in your playing, I highly recommend clicking the link in the description and checking out the free grips masterclass. It's absolutely life-changing. I would not be the same musician I am today had I never learned the grip system, and many of my students share that same exact sentiment. So if you like the sound of these R&B and soulful chords, definitely click the link in the description for the free grips masterclass after this video. So worth your time. Song number 1 is Pony by Ginuwine. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this song. It has that iconic, Timbaland kind of growl in the bass. So the chord progression to this one is 1, 5, 4, 4, flat 7, 1. Very simple. And if we're thinking back to our formula, those chords, and we're gonna play the 7s on them because I believe they play the 7s on these, is C minor 7, G minor 7, F minor 7. Super common, especially in R&B and soulful music. F minor 7 again, B flat, and then C minor 7. We can play B flat dominant 7, but in this song, I already know it's not gonna feel as right if we play a dominant 7, so I'm just gonna play the triad and we're gonna leave it just like that. So let's hear how this sounds, and we all know the iconic bass line, right? Right, so really what we're doing here is we're not jamming to the song, okay? I mean, you can absolutely jam to the song, but if you really want to understand how the harmony works, then you want to listen to the bass line, because the bass line is going to be telling you how the chords are moving. And I'm keeping the voicings incredibly simple because we're not really concerned about the voicings, and I don't want to distract you with anything fancy or anything that's like too far outside of root position or anything like this, because what we're not concerned about is the individual voicings. What we're more concerned about is how the chord progression is moving as a whole, and how one chord relates to another, how this chord moves into the next chord. And that tension and release. There's not so much tension and release in this one, but we still have that movement, okay? And that's what's so important. And the way that we really start to understand that movement is listening to the bass line and being able to sing that bass line. So the reason I picked this song is because he actually sings the bass line. So it's really easy for us to start picking up on that bass note, right? I'm gonna do it up an octave. Dum, 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 dum. Make sure we're right. And then we can take this to the next step. I highly recommend you do this, is go 1, 1, 5, 4, 4, flat 7, 1, 1, 5, 4, 4, flat 7, 1. Being able to do that without the piano, 1, 5, 4, 4, flat 7, 1. Because now when I hear a recording and I hear the bass moving in this way, dum, 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 I'm like, oh, that's just 1, 5, 4. Boom, I got it. I know exactly what they're doing. It's that simple. So by listening to the bass note gives you the answer to the chord progression, because 95% of the time, maybe even 96, 97, 98, 99% of the time, the bass note is playing the root note of the chord. There are some times when it'll be an inversion, and we'll see that in one of the songs a little bit later, but 99% of the time, the bass note is going to be playing the root note of the chord. So if they're playing a C and we're in minor, you can bet it's C minor. So as a matter of fact, what we can do is we can take the first half of this progression and just make a whole song out of it by itself. Right? That That sounds pretty cool. And we can also take the second half of the chord progression and make a whole vibe out of that. So let's say we start using some of the colors and we change up the rhythm a little bit. So we can say, right? So we can start making some vibes literally just out of these. This is why learning songs is so great, because you can literally just steal from the song and you can make your own vibe. And both of those things sounded nothing like Pony. That's the beautiful thing. That's how you steal like an artist. Stealing is not bad. Stealing is what gives you the ammunition to then put your own influences on what you learn and create something amazing. And just to be thorough, when I was playing this progression here and I was playing all these notes and things like this and playing all the extensions, literally just using grips. So go ahead and check out the link below if you like sounds like that. Now before we go on to the next song, there's one more thing I want to talk about in this progression, and that is this 1-5-4. This is a very common thing in R&B. There are so many songs that go 1, 5, 4. There's so many, there's almost too many songs that do that. And there's one really cool thing that we can do from the 5 to the 4. So we have this minor chord and we have this minor chord. What we can do is, because they're both minor, we can actually connect them by a half step. So instead of going G to F, I can say G, G flat, F, okay? And then I would play all minor chords. So G minor, G flat minor, F minor. It's a super cool thing that we can do to make things more interesting over time. So for example, if I'm playing, maybe the third time, I'm sure you guys have heard that a million times, like just having this passing chord. And I'm doing it very in a very slow context here, but we can see that in so many different places. So as a matter of fact, if I take that same example I was doing before, the flat 6 5 1, remember when we said, right? I can stick it in there, right? So we can say, we could do something like that. So that's a really, really fun way. You can always stick in that flat 5, just kind of passing. You can do it fast, you can do it slow, it really doesn't matter. You're only limited by your own creativity. But wanted to mention that because R&B does that all over the place, and it's a really great way to add variation to your chord progressions as the song develops over time. Cry Me a River by Justin Timberlake. I personally think this song is really cool. If you don't like it, you can still learn from it. So this song is actually using that 5 chord as a dominant chord. That's why I chose this, so we can see how that works in action. So this chord progression is 1, 5 dominant, flat 6 as a major 7 chord as it normally comes, and then 4. So here we have this dominant chord not coming to 1, but we have the dominant chord going to the flat 6, which is a really cool resolution. You don't expect it to go there, but it also doesn't sound really unexpected either, because it still resolves very nicely. So let's actually start this out by just playing triads, except for the 7th chord, except for the G7, because the 7 is really what makes it dominant. So except for that, let's play everything else as triads, just so we can see how it sounds. Cry me a river. See, it's very serious, right? Now that actually works for this song really well, right? Emotionally, Cry Me a River. So it works for it to be very serious and somber in this way. But we can also start adding some of the colors. And the very first things that come to mind for me, if I were to add colors to this, would be probably C minor 9, G7, I would do flat 9, and again, I'm gonna use the grips to make this. A flat major 9, and what they do in this song that's really cool is they actually say F minor 6/9. Again, I'm gonna be using grips to play all these voicings so I can actually execute this. I'm not gonna be talking about the voicings so much individually, but just to show you the power of when you understand these extensions, how they change the vibe of the chord progression. So I'm gonna A-B this. The first time I'm gonna play it just triads, and the second time I'm going to attempt to play the exact the exact extensions I just wrote down here. Okay, so let's see. Cry me a river, cry me a river, cry me a river, cry me a river. Ooh! You see the difference that makes? We can probably, mess with some of this stuff. I actually really like how this is just a triad by itself. I like this one. I like that one too. This minor 6/9, I wouldn't do it every single time. So maybe the first time I'll do F minor 7, and then the second time around, I'll do the 6/9. Because if we do that every time, it just gets monotonous, right? So let's see how this sounds. You see how cool that is? That way when we hit that F minor 6/9, it's striking because we didn't hear it the first time. So this is a really awesome way to start adding variation to your chord progressions over time, not by changing the chord, simply by changing the extensions that you play, the colors that you put on it. Now let's hear how this sounds if that 5 chord wasn't a dominant chord, right? Let's hear how it would sound if it was just a regular minor 5 as it naturally comes. I mean, it works, right? You don't have to say what you did. I already know. But that G7 has a pull to it, man. You don't have to say what you did. I already know. Right? Like having that G7 there, it gives you an extra level of tension that's not there with the other one. I already know. I found out from him. There was just no chance. You and me could ever be. I wanna make you sad about it. And again, don't it make you sad? This chord isn't necessarily like sad. This is more, I don't know, it's more like striking, maybe a little even mysterious. But in the context of everything else, it kind of perfectly works for that lyric. Don't it make you sad about it? Like it works perfectly for that. So hope this is giving you some ammunition that you can take into your productions. And moreover, I hope this is giving you a deeper understanding of how the chords work and how they move from one to the other, and how making just these small tweaks really change the emotion that we feel. That's why harmony is so important. That's why mastering harmony and really being able to express yourself at will is such a great skill set, is such a great asset to have as a music producer, because you don't have to sit there and be guessing all the time. If you want to do something, boom, you can do it and you know exactly how to do it, and the grips make that so much easier. Say My Name by Destiny's Child. This one is super simple, but it has a passing chord in it that doesn't necessarily naturally happen in the minor scale chord formula. So that's why we're going to be talking about this song. But before we talk about that passing chord, let's just go ahead and look at the chord progression, because this chord progression, the way that it moves, man, it happens so many times in so many different songs, you have no idea. So learning this one and being comfortable with this one and taking this one through the keys is going to serve you like you have no idea. So the progression to Say My Name is 1, flat 6, 4, flat 7. So C minor 7, A flat major 7, F minor 7, and B flat. And we're already starting to see some parallels, because if you notice, these 3 chords right here are also being used in Cry Me a River. That goes to show you, you're going to want to start messing around with the 1 chord, the flat 6 chord, and the 4 chord, because we're already seeing them pop up over and over again. That means those chords work. They're proven to sound well. So if you use them in your productions are going to sound fire. So let's see how this sounds. Okay, definitely didn't mean to go that long. That song is that song is just a lot of fun. And after I talk about some of these things, definitely go back and watch that section so you can see how I use some of the techniques that I'm about to talk about in real time as I played it right then and there. So first things first, being able to sing that bass note, right? Boom, 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 boom. I can't hit the F, but right? Being able to sing that, that's how you're going to be able to actually understand it when you're hearing it on the record. 1, flat 6, 4, flat 7. And saying that number, that's what really drills it in your brain, drills it in your ear more specifically. Now that's very straightforward, follows the alphabet pretty much straight up, nothing really more to talk about there. But one of the things that they do in this progression that makes it super, super slick, and they do it every single time if you listen to the guitar part, is they have a passing chord, which is a tension chord that brings us right back into the 1. And this passing chord does not naturally occur within the minor scale formula. It's something that they just add in there, but it's a very natural way to get back to 1, and you're gonna see what I mean right now. So what they do is they play a B diminished chord, and what this B diminished chord does is it causes some tension that brings us right back into this 1 chord, and that way we could keep looping this. And it just sounds really, really nice. And the reason it sounds really awesome is because we have C, A flat, F, then we go B flat, B, C. We crawl up by half steps, right? And that really leads us into the C minor chord. So if I play it with the chords on top, see how it leads us there beautifully? If I don't have that passing chord, it still sounds cool, right? But having that, it just really, really brings you into that. And that's how they do it in the room. So hearing that with the double bass, cool. And we could do this anywhere we want. So if you're in the key of A minor, or if you're in the key of E flat minor, or if you're in the key of F minor, all you need to do is go a half step down, make it a diminished chord, and then hit your root. For example, if I'm in the key of F minor, right? Here's my F chord. All I'm gonna do is go a half step down, E, play a diminished chord, and I can just use the diminished grip and it works out perfectly. And it brings me right into here. So let's say I'm doing 4, 5, 1, okay? In the key of F minor. Right? And I want to make it just a little bit more interesting. I can say, you see what I mean? That E diminished really gave you a super, super big pull, and then you finally landed. So just an example of the same exact technique, just done in a different key and a little bit slower. Now the other thing I can do is I can actually just sub out this B flat completely for a G7 chord, for a 5 chord, because again, the function of the 5 chord is to bring you back to 1. Is to have that tension to bring you to a resolution. And maybe I don't want to do it every time, but for the sake of the example, I'm just going to do it every time so we can hear what it sounds like. Say my name, when no one is around you. Say baby I love you, if you ain't running games. It works perfectly, if it's just perfectly, okay? And that's G7 flat 9, I can also do G7 altered. Say my name, when no one is around you. Say baby I love you, if you ain't running games. Then I can put them together. The other thing I can do, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but I'm hearing it, is I can do the 5 chord and I can do the diminished chord that brings me right back into 1. So let's do this. I'm gonna play the progression the first time just as is, right? 1, flat 6, 4, flat 7. And then the next time, I'm gonna play exactly what you see written here. And so let's see how this sounds. So we can see, you know, how it sounds originally and then how it sounds with these substitutions. cool. Gives you some extra variation. Again, so these are things we can put together over time to give our chord progression some variation. And these are ways we can add some extra tension, some extra release into our music. And last but not least, let's take a look at What Kind of Man Would I Be by Mint Condition. This song is an absolute classic, and you're gonna notice a lot of the same chords that we used before being used in this one. So let's talk about it. Now, at first glance, it might seem like there's a lot going on in this progression, especially because I just wrote it out and I didn't explain it as I was writing it out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look at it in halves. So we have, first half of the progression and then the second half of the progression. But before we actually dissect it, I'm just gonna play the entire thing so we can hear how it sounds. What kind of man I'll be if I lived unfaithful? What kind of girl would you be if you listen and I don't wanna see her cry? So that's the whole progression. It would just happen one more time. And in that version, I just added all the colors because the song feels like that. Okay, I didn't just play minor 7s, I played minor 11s and all the other really, really nice things. All right, so taking a look at this first half, we already see our favorite chords here, right? 4, flat 6, and 1. I mean, look at this. 4, flat 6, and 1. If we come over here, 4, flat 6, and 1. Pretty much all these songs. Well, this one doesn't use the flat 6, but we have the 4 and the 1. So if you want to make a hit, use the 4 chord, use the 1 chord, and use the flat 6 chord because it's going to work. This is the beauty of learning songs because you can also see that, yes, they're using the same 3 chords, but they're wrapping them around and using them with other chords, and they're also changing the order. It's not always 4 flat 6 1 or 1 flat 6 4. They're changing the order. Now, what I find really cool about this song is people ask me all the time, do I have to start my chord progression on the 1 chord? No, you absolutely do not. You can start on any chord you want. And we can see here that in this song, they actually start on the 4 chord. So they go 4, 1, flat 6 to the 5. I mean, there's not really anything special about that. We've seen that over and over again. But again, we want to be able to sing that bass line. That's the most important part. So, boom, 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 right? Then check your answer. Boom, boom, boom. And you may sing it a little bit out of tune. I'm not a singer. I don't know if you're a singer, but it doesn't really matter. You're not training your voice, you're training your ear. And by being able to sing it, you're really locking it in because you're not using your finger to have a sound come out of some external device. You're using your own device to sing the note. So it really locks it in to your musical DNA and you're really able to hear this stuff as it's happening. So what kind of flat 6, walk it to the 5. Boom. So that's the first half. Now the second half, it doesn't necessarily leave the Roman numeral formula, the songwriter's alphabet, but it does throw an inversion in there. So if you notice in this chord, it says flat 7 over 3. It says B flat over D. Really what that means is when I play this B flat chord, instead of playing it over B flat, I'm gonna play it over the 3rd. What's the 3rd of B flat? Well, I mean, I can see clear as day right here. All I need to do is count up to 3. 1, 2, 3. It's D. So B flat over D. It's just the 3rd note of the scale. The reason that sounds cool is because notice the difference when I play this line exactly as it is, and then I'll do a pass without the inversion. So the first time I'm going to play C minor 7, B flat over D, E flat. And the second time I'm going to play C minor 7, B flat, E flat, just B flat in a root position. And notice the difference. It's gonna be completely obvious. Sounds wonderful, right? Now in root position. Still works, but it doesn't have the same effect. So in context with the song, it gives us this rising motion, right? What kind of man would I be if I lived unfaithfully? What kind of girl would you be? Check it out. If you didn't sin and I don't wanna see. Sounds beautiful. We have this. Right, it brings us right back into that F at the beginning. That's what's really great about that. So the easiest way to actually accomplish this is just to recognize the bass is really just climbing up the D minor scale. C, D, E flat. That's it. That's all it's doing. And your right hand plays the chords. C minor 7, B flat, E flat. Okay, so we have. Again, this video isn't diving super deep into voicings themselves. That's what the Grips Masterclass is for, and other videos are for. We're talking about the chord progression as it moves. So now that we've analyzed every piece of it, let's go ahead and hear it in context, and we're gonna use the double bass for all the chords so we can really hear that chord motion. So you see how I added that G7? You see how instead of playing the minor 5, I played the major 5? And they actually do that in the song, by the way, which is probably why I heard it. But you see how we can just substitute these 5s and these major 5s and things sound really, really cool. Now there's 2 things that we can do to this chord progression, and they're both using that diminished passing chord that we talked about in Say My Name. So the first one is they substitute this entire 5 chord for that B diminished chord, because again, we're coming into this C. So we have this 7 chord that's bringing us right into the C. And I'm actually gonna write it there because it makes it easier to kind of see the tension and release. And then the other place they use it is right here. After this E flat, they play an E diminished, which brings us right into this F. So again, I'm gonna put it over here because it makes it easier to see the tension. So if I started here from the F using these substitutions, listen to how cool it sounds. What kind of man would I be? Then he says, what kind of girl would you be if you... Right? Doesn't that sound so cool? And again, I can't leave it there. Like, just me stopping there, it doesn't sound right. We have to... What kind of girl would you be if you did the same? And I don't wanna see her cry. Do you see how, like, it just brought you there so much better? I know I'm going by it rather quickly and I'm gonna break it down in a second, but do you see how in context it just brings you there? So again, I'm going to C minor, which is the 1 chord. I can just go down by a half step and play that B diminished as we see right here. It's gonna bring me perfectly, right? And then we have this walk up, right? And then I'm landing again on this F, okay? But instead of doing the whole step, I can walk up by a half step. Okay? And I can make that a diminished chord. Okay? So E flat, E, diminished, using that diminished grip, F. Okay? So let me do it one more time without talking, that way you can see. And definitely follow along as it's written here. And also, if you can, I'll play it twice. Follow along as it's written here and sing the bass note. I know you can pause and rewind the video, but I'm gonna play it twice anyway, just so we can really, really hear that context. Right, you hear how that, it just makes it so buttery smooth. So we talked about a lot of things in this video. Number 1, we talked about the dominant chord, how it naturally occurs on the 5 chord, and that the dominant chord doesn't work by itself and it needs to be attached to that resolution, whether it's going to the 1 chord, we saw it go to the flat 6 chord, or we can go to the 4 chord. Those are probably the most common places that we can go when you're playing a dominant chord. But the point being is that the dominant chord needs to go somewhere. If it doesn't go somewhere, it feels empty, it feels wrong. Then we talked about the minor scale and how minor scales actually come from major scales. And the way that we make the minor scale is we flat the 3rd note, the 6th note, and the 7th note of the major scale, and that's how we get the minor sound. Then we took this minor scale and we play 1, skip 1, and stacked them up like a pancake, and we found out what our minor songwriters alphabet is. And we also talked about how we can take that 5 chord and instead of it being minor, we can substitute it for a dominant 5 and how that'll give us some extra tension as we're creating our chord progressions. Then we took a look at pony and we saw how we can just take pieces of a chord progression and create whole new songs out of them. And we also learned the really cool half step down passing chord that we can do from the 5 to the 4. Then we took a look at Cry Me a River, and what we really saw was how the first time we can play the chord progression with a certain set of extensions, and then the second time we can change the chord progression and maybe just change the colors that we're playing on one note. For example, F minor 7 versus F minor 6 9, and how that gives us a crazy different emotional feel just by changing the colors that we're using. Not necessarily by changing the chord, it's still an F minor chord. We're just saying F minor 7 or F minor 6 9. Then we took a look at Say My Name, and we introduced how we can substitute the 5 chord for the flat 7 chord. And we talked about how we can use this diminished passing chord to get us back to the 1. And in What Kind of Man Would I Be, we saw how we can use the same diminished passing chord here, but we can also use that same diminished passing chord trick going to the 4 chord. These are two very good places to use it, going to the 1 and going to the 4 in minor. And we also learned what I like to call the gospel walk-up, where we're having that flat 7 over 3 inversion. I hope this video has been valuable to you. If it has, definitely hit that subscribe button so you can get more videos just like these. If you are interested in learning grips so you can actually execute on this stuff way easier without getting lost in the theory, click the link in the description below for the free grips masterclass. On there, I will tell you a little bit more about my grip system mastery program, which I'm currently running an 85% off special with. So go ahead and click the link in the description below right now so you can take advantage of that. My name is BruceBeats. I will see you on the next video. Peace.